way between Iowa and the Republic of Kosovo, which aims to bridge the gap between higher education and the private sector. Guests from the University of Iowa, Iowa State University, and Kosovo will join us in just a moment to elaborate. A little later in the program, we'll meet undergraduate student Catherine Liu and graduate student Amira Nash, the 2023 winners of the UI's Global Student Awards. These awards recognize exceptional activities in support of international education, and I think it will be a real treat to hear Catherine and Amira talk about their global adventures. But first, the Iowa-Kosovo connection. A collaborative project titled Private Sector Partnerships to Strengthen Higher Education is currently underway, involving partners from the University of Iowa, Iowa State University, and the Kosovo Education Center. This initiative received $3.99 million in funding from the U.S. Agency for International Development and additional funding from the University of Iowa, with an aim of strengthening partnerships between the private sector and academic institutions, thereby supporting the development of market-oriented and experiential learning approaches in the information and communication technology and agriculture sectors of Kosovo. We have a wonderful group of guests, all of whom are deeply involved in the project, who'll give us the full picture from the inception of the initiative to the progress since April 2023, and to the desired outcomes at the conclusion of the activity. Here to tell us more about it are Russell Ganim, Associate Provost and Dean of International Programs at the University of Iowa. Welcome, Russ. Can you tell us about your role in this activity?
Well, thank you very much, Joan. So, my role is basically to represent University of Iowa Central Administration in the activity. I have coordinated with the PIs, or the principal investigators, Cassie Barnhart from the University of Iowa and Kurt Youngs from Iowa State University, for several years, even before we submitted the application for this cooperative agreement. More generally, I have liaised with the Kosovo Embassy in Washington, D.C., as well as the consulate in Des Moines, to promote activities between the state of Iowa and the Republic of Kosovo. Similarly, I've been part of delegation visits from the state of Iowa to Kosovo. We have many different relationships that really started with military connections, but then expanded into law enforcement, education, economic development, and even a little bit into the health sciences. So that kind of gives my, or that summarizes my participation. But I think my principal role now is to communicate about the activity to the university and also to the state of Iowa and to political leaders, so that they can get a better understanding of how important this relationship is and all of the contributions that the activity is bringing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you for getting us started with that. And I want to go now to Cassie Barnhart. You are an associate professor of higher education and student affairs at the UI, also serving as the program director for this activity. Welcome, Cassie. What does it mean to be the program director?
Sure. Thanks for having us and giving us the opportunity to talk about this initiative and this activity. As the program director, I'm putting together all the pieces and overseeing the main objectives of the project. I'd love to tell you a little bit about how we got started.
Please.
Does that work for you? Okay. So my colleague, Dr. Kurt Youngs at Iowa State, and I had been focusing on how conversations about how we could have a bigger impact. We had both built relationships for quite some time in Kosovo, and we were looking for an opportunity to bring our expertise in education and agriculture to the nation of Kosovo, to work with their universities closely to prepare students so they could, make a difference in their fields of study in particular. So as a scholar of higher education, I focus on the relationship between universities and society. And so the natural link here was connecting the private sector to universities. So in April of 2022, USAID indicated that they were interested in partnering with Iowa to work on the development of a project. So for the next 8 months, Our team, the folks you described, Iowa State, Iowa, and the Kosova Education Center, collaborated with our colleagues in the Economic and Growth section of the U.S. Mission in Kosovo to design a multifaceted project over 5 years that would achieve the 4 objectives around data, curricular reform, experiential learning, and industry-driven research.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, we'll be able to get into it a great deal more fully in just a moment. But thanks for sort of letting us know about the background of this. And I want to turn next to your colleague, Dr. Kurt Youngs, Morrill Professor of Animal Science, occupying the M.E. Ensminger Endowed Chair of International Alumni Agriculture, International Animal Agriculture. Sorry, I got this all messed up, Kurt. You're going to have to straighten me out later. But Morrill Professor of Animal Science, occupying the M.E. Ensminger Endowed Chair of International Animal Agriculture at Iowa State University, and additionally contributing as the Senior Agricultural Technical Specialist for this activity. So hi there, Kurt. That was a mouthful, but thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Joan, and thank you for the opportunity. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here with the members of the Iowa Consortium, as we like to call ourselves, who are working together to try to make a difference in the lives of youth in Kosovo. So I have the fun part about dabbling in 3 of the 4 different objectives that we have of the project. So I bring agricultural expertise to this activity. I've been working boots on the ground in Kosovo for almost 12 years now. I'm bringing curriculum development expertise, my vast experience in student experiential learning, experience of agricultural extension, where we are, working, connecting, transferring technology, and also research capacity building. So as Cassie mentioned, here we are as kind of the odd couple, me from agriculture and her from higher education, but we make a wonderful team, and so thankful for this opportunity that we can work together.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, you said you've been involved with things in Kosovo for 12 years. How did you first get started?
I actually got started in the summer of 2011. I submitted an application to do some training for a professor from the University of Pristina as a part of the United States Department of Agriculture Foreign Agriculture Service Borlaug Fellowship Program, which is named after Iowa native Norman Borlaug. And to make a long story short, we hit it off. As a part of that program, they asked that the mentor go visit the home country of the mentee. And when I got there, I fell in love with Kosovo and been going back ever since.
Wow. Wow. Terrific. Well, thank you. And I'd like to go now to Ili Gashi, who's serving as the chief of party for the activity. Hello, Ili. And thank you for staying up late in Kosovo and joining us. What does chief of party for this activity mean, and what is your role?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you here tonight. As a chief of party, my role is similar to being a CEO of the project. It involves providing strategic direction, ensuring that project goals align with both USAID's objectives and the needs of the local context. In this case, bridging the gap between the private sector and the universities to strengthen cooperation. In a nutshell, I the planning, the implementation, the monitoring of the activities, and a key part of my role involves engaging with a diverse range of stakeholders, including local and international partners, government entities, universities, private sector actors, and the community. So I'm responsible for keeping the communication between the partners and the USAID here in Kosovo and in Iowa.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And I'd like to next introduce Zoe Shares, who's the project manager from the University of Iowa. Hi, Zoe. How are you involved in this activity?
Hi, Joan. Thanks for having me. I am the senior project manager on the activity. And so what that means for me is I get to work with some of the on-the-ground implementation parts of the activity with Cassie and Ellie in Kosovo. And I also get to work really closely with some of our partners here at the University of Iowa. A lot of my role is sort of networking that ecosystem between Kosovo and the state of Iowa, and then more particularly the University of Iowa. And so that's kind of where my role fits in.
Really fun. Have you been traveling back and forth to Kosovo?
I have, yes. I've gone 3 times since I started last
Ah.
July. And I'm getting to go again in about a month. So it's
Ah.
blast. I very much resonate with Kurt saying once you're there, you're kind of in it. It's a
Yeah. That's really wonderful. And now I want to introduce a really special member of this evening's conversation because he's helped put this whole thing together for us tonight. And that's Artie Magini, Communications Manager for the activity. Hi, Artie.
Hi, Joan. Thank you for
Yeah, thank you so much for joining the conversation and also for doing a great deal of the legwork in organizing this discussion. What is your role in this project overall?
Well, I'm the communications manager, and as such, I support the team in promoting our latest work to all those involved, including students, university staff, private sector, and international development community in Kosovo. I also help design and publish learning resources produced throughout the activity. And most importantly, I contribute to designing and establishing long-term mechanisms and practices to enhance communication between the private sector and universities. And also just before we move on, as a Kosovan citizen, I'd like to thank everyone who have made this important and highly beneficial initiative possible and available to our people. So starting from US taxpayers to USAID, University of Iowa, and Iowa State University. It's a pleasure to work with you guys. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Artie. So let's talk a little bit about how this project, what we are calling the activity, how it was conceived and how it began. Let me start with you, Russ. This is an exciting project, and the UI has been deeply involved, as we've learned from the beginning. Help us understand, if you will, the relationship between Iowa and the Republic of Kosovo, and explain how international programs is involved in this.
Sure. Maybe we'll go back in the history a little bit. So for those of us, or for those members of the audience who maybe don't know much about Kosovo, it was part of the former Yugoslavia. And as we know, the former Yugoslavia broke up in the 1990s. There was quite a bit of conflict associated with that breakup. So Kosovo had long been occupied by Serbia. Serbia still regards Kosovo as sort of a renegade province. But when the war in Bosnia broke out, and there was obviously it was a human tragedy. There was genocide. The U.S. government did not want the same thing to happen in Kosovo, or in Kosova, as it's called by the people there. So Bill Clinton was the president at the time. He sent in American troops. NATO forces also were involved to repel the Serbs and to establish some kind of peace. The Iowa National Guard was brought in at that time. So we're talking about the late 1990s, early 2000s. And members of the Iowa National Guard helped train the Kosovo security forces, and they are there today. So that military connection is the basis for everything. And so that led to the collaborations or the partnerships in all sorts of sectors that we had mentioned before, like education, government, business, law enforcement. And more importantly, I think there have been all sorts of cultural connections that have been formed because of this very, very close bond. And so the cultural connections led to a number of delegation visits. Also, it's important to mention that the U.S. government has invested billions of dollars in Kosovo over the last 10 to 15 years. I think in part to promote democracy, in part for security reasons, also to stem the brain drain from Kosovo to the rest of Europe and or North America. So the University of Iowa has been involved, because there is this opportunity to create new programming in a very open and welcoming environment. To echo what Kurt and Zoe have said, is that, and Artie as well, is that the people of Kosovo welcome Americans and especially Iowans with open arms. I've traveled a lot of places. I have never felt more at home, away from home, than I have in Kosovo. So there's all sorts of opportunity to develop partnerships in education and in multiple disciplines across our campus. So one of the things that International Programs does is to serve as a convener in kind of a hub and spoke mechanism, to where we connect opportunities in Kosovo to our various colleges and departments. And one really good example of that is that in early February, we had what we called a Kosovo social, where Cassie and Zoe presented about the activity. I talked a little bit about it as well. We invited faculty members and students on campus who were already working in Kosovo, but also we extended the invitation to people who were curious about Kosovo to see how they might become involved. And we had really good turnout, very good interest. We've been following up. And while the College of Education has been the primary motor behind the University of Iowa's engagement in Kosovo, we've also seen a lot of activity from the College of Law, the College of Business, soon to be the College of Pharmacy. I'll be taking a trip with our Dean of the College of Pharmacy next month to Kosovo to work with partners at the University of Pristina about opening up an institute for pharmacy. And so one of the reasons why the University of Iowa is so engaged is because of the opportunities that this presents for our students and faculty to get experience abroad in a very original and creative way. And so throughout the life of the activity, because the activity or the funding lasts for 5 years, we intend to open as many possibilities as possible or as many opportunities as possible to our campus community, because Kosovo provides the right environment for us to do that.
Well, Cassie, so as we've already learned, you played a significant role in designing this activity. Can you add to what Russ has already said regarding how it all began and how you proposed this idea both to the UI and to other partners?
Sure. So I had been working in Kosovo since about 2016. I had lived there for a semester with my family as a Fulbright scholar, and my post was inside the Ministry of Education in the higher ed department. So I got to know the higher ed system really well, and all of its merits and all of its challenges. And I made connections all over campus, and I also all over the campuses in the nation. And I also learned about some of the work that USAID and other international donors were doing in the higher ed sector to try to build capacity overall. And so I had a pretty close look at what the needs were. And right away, as we started talking to partners, we identified that we wanted to focus on the public universities. Public universities give students, especially the students who have the fewest resources, the most opportunity to, develop their talents and to, make a career for themselves, bring a life and an opportunity structure for themselves through employment and engagement using their knowledge for bettering things. So the prior work that had been done, especially with USAID, was focused on the flagship research institution, University of Pristina. University of Pristina is the largest Albanian-speaking language university in the world. They're enormous. They're also the oldest in Kosovo, and they are, again, as I said, the flagship research institution. The other public institutions in the country are more like regional comprehensive institutions that Iowans and other people in the United States would be familiar with. And so part of our creation was selecting strategically institutions that were really interested in working collaboratively with us in two sectors that were going to be most likely to have economic opportunity for young Kosovan students. Unemployment is among the highest in all of Europe in Kosovo. And so getting students prepared to move to the labor market is essential. So we identified with USAID agriculture and information and communication technologies as the two sectors that are most likely to be creating opportunities for students. So when University of Pristina had received prior aid in other higher ed projects, they did some formative things, like they created a research office, which is connected in a way to what we're doing now. They created a business incubator, which was very much centered around private sector initiatives. They created a center for teaching that is focused on curricular reform. And they also worked to establish some systems in the Career Center. Now, all those systems were established by 2019. But the transition from 2019 to where we are presently, and when we started designing the project, was basically to say some of those capacities still need a little support, but different types of support. They need more people inside campuses to engage strategically with them, to use them, to go outside the university and connect with people. And so that's really how our initiatives started to develop. We're saying, okay, here are these kinds of systems that were created for the flagship. How do we move them out to smaller universities? So we picked two others, University of Pea, which focuses largely on agriculture, and University of Prizren, that's sort of a regional university that has both ICT and agriculture. How do we extend those capacities out? And how do we get more people involved on campus, students and professors, and more companies involved on those capacities through a set of interventions? So that's what our project focuses on.
Wow. Wow. Ilya, I'll go to you now. What needs does Kosovo have in its efforts to develop its education, information, and communication technologies sector, as well as the agriculture sectors?
Yes, I think both Russ and Cassie gave a very good sort of context, historical, and background about how this all came about. I would just say that the need for high quality university education in Kosovo is critical, especially given the youthful demographic of the country. I will just add that the current educational system, because of the historical processes that Russ has explained, faces challenges in retention and graduation rates, with only a fraction of students completing their degrees. This issue is also combined by the lack of alignment between university curricula and the needs of the labor market, which leads to the mismatch between graduate skills and employers' requirements, which we are addressing through this specific activity by enhancing curricula to make it more applied and relevant to the current market needs, by developing mechanisms for direct engagement between the private sector and universities. And one focus that we have, and which is quite unusual for projects that support university partnerships, is capacity building. So we are working very closely with universities' administrative staff to build structure systems that support students in acquiring the necessary skills, knowledge, and experiences for the workforce. Mm-hmm. And as it was stated, we work in these two areas, ICT and ag, because these are the two most sort of essential sectors that can drive economic growth, innovation, and respond to the needs of the country. Mm-hmm. I think Kurt will be able to explain better why agriculture sector, but this is sort of the general overview that I can give for now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, Kurt, we'll toss it over to you. So you are a longtime professor of animal science at Iowa State, and you have been brought into this project as senior agricultural technical specialist. what can you tell us about agricultural development as it stands now, maybe the history, and as it stands now in Kosovo?
Well, thank you, Joan. But before I directly answer your question, I think Dr. Barnhart was being very modest in describing her role in helping to draft this proposal. And we worked very hard with Petra Tahiri from Kosovo Education Center. We were fortunate to convince Ellie to become our chief of party. We are really blessed with a magnificent team of people on the ground, one of whom you got to meet in terms of Artie. But this has truly been a massive team effort, and I just want to acknowledge Cassie's leadership in this effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, to address your question about agricultural development, let me try to put things in context. Iowa ranks number 2 in the United States for agricultural cash receipts, second only to the state of California. We could fit about 13 countries of Kosovo into the state of Iowa. They're a very small country. And when you consider about 40% of the land in Kosovo is mountains and forests, that makes it sound like, gee, they don't have much land to work with. So if we look at the past efforts of a lot of direct foreign assistance programs, there was a lot of focus on high value products. And Kosovo is blessed to have some naturally occurring medicinal and aromatic plants. They have the ability to grow crops like raspberries and blueberries. As I have spent time in Kosovo over the years, and particularly as a part of this activity, as we're trying to identify private sector partners that will help us to partner with the universities to drive that curricular reform and to provide the student internship opportunities. I have seen some world-class agricultural food production facilities in Kosovo, which really, really is exciting. And so I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity to start connecting some of the great things that are already going on with the youth so that they can see agriculture as a bright prospect for their future. It can be a career. And, you know, we've seen a lot of changes when Russian invasion of Ukraine happened. The people of Kosovo love their bread. And when there's wheat in short supply, you know, the Ministry of Agriculture had to make some transition to provide some subsidies to increase the acreage, or what they would say the hectares of wheat that were planted. My particular interest as an animal scientist is trying to help them go back to their roots. They were a major sheep producing region because of the mountainous terrain that was well suited for grazing, but not suited for growing corn and soybeans, for example. They also have had substantial capital investment in milk processing plants. And I was really kind of shocked when I learned there's 45 milk processing plants in this nation of Kosovo. And somebody somewhere along the line built all these plants, but they forgot that we need raw milk to keep those plants busy. So when we start looking at opportunities, the Ministry of Agriculture publishes every year what they call the Green Report. The Kosovo Statistics Agency also publishes data. What I saw during my early visits was about 50% of the arable land, or land that could be used for crop production, was sitting idle. And of the remaining 50% that was being used, it was not being used to its full potential. So I think there's just so much opportunity here to stimulate economic development, particularly in the rural areas, by helping agriculture grow, getting students excited about agriculture, getting these world-class companies, some of whom are exporting here their products to the U.S., to get them engaged more with our students.
Wow. Wow. Well, tremendous. Yeah. So let me come back to you then again, Eli. So we've heard a little bit about agricultural development in Kosovo and some of the goals of the project related to agriculture. The information and communication technology sector is also part of this project, as you've already discussed. What strategic importance is there to further development in this area?
Before I talk about ICT, I would like to emphasize that what we are aiming to do is to make these two sectors in Kosovo talk to one another.
Mhm.
A cross-sectoral approach is crucial, where the improvements in one sector can drive progress in another. So we are working very hard to have our agriculture faculties talk to ICT professors as well, where they can come together and find solutions for specific issues that they might arise. Just to give you an overview of where ICT stands in Kosovo in terms of as a sector, and the ICT sector in Kosovo is rapidly expanding with an increasing number of companies exporting services and products. And it's reflecting a growing contribution to the country's economy. More specifically, and I got this data from German Chamber of Commerce, 85% of companies within this sector are engaged in export activities. So all these companies that we have in ICT are exporting their products, are selling basically the services. And both at the government level, but also at the local level, what we see in different regions of Kosovo, this growing sector is not only enhancing economic growth, but also providing high-paying jobs and therefore addressing unemployment, poverty, and immigration challenges within Kosovo. But just to go back to what Kurt was saying before, is that we are trying to make cross-sectoral cooperation between ICT and ag so that we find solutions that are necessary to address challenges.
Right, right. Cassie, I'd like to just turn to you for a second and ask you, what is it about the University of Iowa's College of Education that makes it a good partner for Kosovo in these efforts?
I would say that one of the number one things that the College of Education can offer is its ability to really give university administrators the tools to engage in capacity building. Our higher ed and student affairs program is very much focused on the professionalization of university administrators. If you think about where the gaps are in Kosovo, at each of the 3 campuses we're working with, there's 1, maybe 2, and in one instance, there's 3 career services professionals for the entire university. So if you think about all of the students across all degree programs, they just have a lack of capacity. So one of the ways that the College of Ed in particular, is focused on being a unique contributor is how can we use technology and teaching and learning tools and online and virtual engagement to build structures and routines for administrators that administrators can utilize with a human side, but also, scale up their efforts in an environment where it's unlikely that they're going to be able to hire a massive amount of staff to do orientation or all those other services that are required. So I would say our ability in the College of Ed to be innovative educators, to professionalize staff, to also work directly with students and to teach campus professionals how to work closely with students to give them the confidence and the confidence and the sophistication to be ready to interact with companies and to be enabled that they can feel good about what they know and how they're organizing their interactions. That's one of the hardest things for young people. In terms of a cultural challenge, there's a lot of deference to elders, and respect, and that's terrific, and it should remain that way. But it also requires confidence and skill to interact in ways with adults in the sectors that allow them to get their foot in the door with companies or to make that first connection and find a mentor and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to go into a detailed discussion in just a moment, but there are, I think, 4 main objectives to this activity, this project. Could you tell us what they are?
Certainly.
Oh, Cassie, I'm sorry, that was for you, Cassie.
I
Sorry.
figured.
Mm-hmm.
The 4 objectives. Objective 1 is around data, using data to inform, make the connections between the labor market and the universities. So universities are utilizing data for strategic decision making. Objective 2 is around curricular reform. So the study programs in Ag and ICT are actually teaching the skills and competencies that students will need once they graduate and move to the private sector. Objective 3 is around experiential learning, giving students field and applied experiences that are both created for them, but also self-directed and student-initiated. So they have tangible experiences they can talk about. And objective 4 is around industry-focused research and expertise, making sure that these study programs have guidance from folks like Kurt, but are also using their intellectual capacities to innovate and, pursue new discovery.
Yeah, well, thank you. And staying with you, Cassie, you mentioned that the first objective is to enhance universities' analytic capabilities and access to labor market data. What are the current limitations and what will result from increased analytic capabilities and more access to labor market data?
So one of the key challenges is that what we take for granted in the United States around student record systems are relatively nascent and new databases, and they're somewhat limited. And so the ability to track things that, like Ellie was talking about, retention, student retention, student graduation, student academic performance, in particular courses, to really strategically identify where students are having trouble so universities can intervene effectively. Those systems are sort of weak. So one of what we're doing is helping them not just build different systems, but using the data they have in efficient ways so they can get the maximum amount of information out of what what they have currently. To do that, we're building teams on each of our campuses of professionals, professors, university leadership, folks on campus in career services and in data units, to build a team so they can cooperate and sustainably enact these data processes over time. The other side of it is we're working with our private sector partners, which there are lots of them. I'm sure we'll talk about that soon, to get the main information and sectoral reports, whether it's local to the company or local to the sector, and getting that in front of departmental faculty, the professors, so they can see what the needs are and so they can deliberate and be mindful about what they need to teach in their courses. And we connect all those different data pieces to this mechanism we have called industrial boards, which is basically a regular group that convenes of professors, university leaders, and private sector partners. They do lots of things, but looking at data is one of their activities to help strategically plan and engage in decision making.
Yeah. Eli, what steps have been undertaken so far within the higher education community?
I think Cassie elaborated quite in good detail, but over the past year, we have worked very hard in enhancing the analytical capabilities and of the university staff. I think key to this activity is change of the mindset, which is something that we do not necessarily by naming it as an activity. I think with this objective, what we aim to do is to make university staff, the administrative, but also teaching staff, to think of the importance of data, to start using, as Cassie said, the data that they already have available and make decisions based on those data. But to do that, they need to have a model. And I don't think that there is anyone better than University of Iowa and Iowa State to show them how this is done in a well-structured, well-positioned university. And I think whatever other activities we mention, they sound very technical, and the work that we do with the staff, the training, the empowerment that we provide to the staff. And I use empowerment because I think it's more empowerment than it's training. I think it doesn't do the just. But the most important thing is the shift of the mindset. We have to start, have the staff use the data and use examples of how other universities do that. So I think this is crucial to mention as part of this objective.
Yeah. Artie, educational analytics training sessions are being held, I guess, with academic staff at partner universities, and whether training's the right word or not, you can weigh in on that. But how have the attendees to these sessions responded?
Well, so far, participants have been quite engaged and committed to learning best practices for data collection and management. Although these universities had already had these data management processes in place, this was a great opportunity to further strengthen these practices and to expand the educational data analytics teams across different departments of the university. So these teams now consist of professors, study program directors, faculty administration staff, representatives from student career service centers and centers for teaching excellence. From what we've gathered so far, they've been very grateful to explore and adapt best practices from Iowan universities in order to streamline these processes and make labor market data management even more efficient. They are very eager to learn better ways to always be more up to date with the latest needs, challenges, and trends in regards to student and professor experience and private sector insights. They are very glad to have defined responsibilities amongst their teams to learn how to design surveys to gather information they need, explore ways to collect data, analyze it, produce finding reports, and inform their decision-making processes, whether that's for improving, their university's efforts to revise curriculums, improve overall student experience, enhance experiential learning, and enhance applied research initiatives with the private sector.
Yeah, thank you. Zoe, I understand that industrial board meetings that have been held at the UI have provided a kind of model. Cassie talked a little bit about the industrial board meetings, but they provided some kind of model for Kosovo. What's the intent of these meetings, and how does the UI process inform what you're doing with Kosovo?
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is that the industrial boards were meeting. They existed before our activity came into play. So those were sort of longstanding structures that were meant to do what we're coming in to help the industrial boards do, which is in some ways talk to the universities. So that's sort of the first part of that. I got nervous, Joan. Can you ask me the second part of that question again?
Well, yeah, the second part of the question was, what's the intent of the meetings, and how does the process we use here at the UI, how does that inform what's going on with your colleagues in Kosovo?
Right. So the intent of the industrial board meetings, and I'm going to ask Cassie and Ellie to jump in a little bit if I get astray, because this is a little bit less my wheelhouse. But we talk about the industrial board meetings are meant to talk about sector specific issues or topics or things that are coming up that would be relevant to the universities. So they're well attended by like the administrators of those programs that are there to kind of like get some feedback is the idea. Right. And so our activity is coming in, and we're trying quite hard to make sure that the private sector, that the industrial boards and the administration for these study programs are taking the lead on this in a lot of ways because we want to be sort of helping uplift the work that they're already doing and sort of making those industrial boards a more productive and more effective working group, because the folks that are engaging are doing good work. We just need to kind of strengthen that.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much. And I think now let's just move on to objective 2, and I'll bring it back to Cassie. The second objective was supporting universities in developing or revising curricula to align with market demand. What existing mechanisms did your targeted universities use in curriculum revision, and what gaps are you addressing?
Sure. So Kosovo, like much of Europe, has a very specific accreditation protocol for its study programs. And so there's very much the spirit that if you study, engineering at one location in Europe, it's very similar to another location in Europe. So there's a lot of like parity between programs at different universities. That's slightly different than it is in the United States. That's important to know because it also, the accreditation context in Kosovo makes it somewhat difficult to change the course sequences in a particular study program, because those are sort of specified. If you need to teach this topic in the food technology program at the University of Pea, that you can expect that same topic to show up at at a university in Berlin or something. So what the gap is that while Kosovo study programs have sort of the right sequence of courses, what's going inside an individual course, the instruction itself or the pedagogy, is lacking the fundamental approach to teaching and learning that allows professors to make sure students are getting the right content, that they're getting applied assignments and regular feedback on that, and that all of those things are connected specifically to what the corporate sector needs for those study programs to produce in terms of competencies for the graduates. So all that said, our process is a two-part process to meet those gaps. First, we have a process that's called the corporate panel process, where we bring a group of university professors and professionals that hire people for a particular study program. Again, in this example, maybe the food technology program. You put about 10 of those professionals in a room with the professors, and they look at what are the most essential competencies that people performing those jobs with food technology degrees need to have. What are those competencies? So that's part one. And that's a couple days of workshops together where they produce these competencies. Those competencies are transformed into learning outcomes, stated learning outcomes. And then the part two is each of the study program faculty or the professors that teach in that study program go through a multi-day workshop that's about bringing those competencies into their individual courses and developing actual assignments that are revised in ways that give students opportunity to apply their skills, get feedback on them, and improve them. And so there's, assessment that actually helps students learn, as opposed to high stakes assessment that's just about do you pass or fail the course, which has sort of been the tradition for a long time, without a lot of feedback on what you need to know to get better at those skills that you're trying to learn in the course.
Yeah, right. Well, Ellie, I don't know if you feel that Cassie has already responded to this question, but could you explain the stages of support that are planned to enhance this revision of curriculum?
I think Cassie walked us through the process. I think it's important for us to mention here that the way that the activity is designed is to leave the sort of the knowledge and the know-how with the institutions. So apart from the fact that we are in charge of organizing the corporate panels and facilitating the process, once the activity is done, we leave behind a legacy, a structure in place, a methodology in place that these professors, the faculties that we are working with, can continue to use the same methodology, the same way we have done that for during the period of the activity. So I think this is important to mention. That goes back to the beginning, what I said in the beginning, that this is a very well-designed activity to build capacity and leave that capacity with our university partners.
Right. So Kurt, aside from curriculum revision, you've also been working with academics on lecture delivery practices. How has this progressed so far, and what are the perspectives of local professors on these kinds of interventions?
Well, thank you, Joan, for that question. I kind of want to start off by saying, if you look at professors in the biological sciences, chemical sciences, physical sciences, agricultural sciences, we were trained as researchers, not as teachers.
Mhm.
And so one of the challenges is, how do you take a researcher and give them the tools they need to convey their technical subject matter to their students in a manner where the students can retain and subsequently use the information? So I had the privilege of inviting one of my colleagues from Iowa State University, Dr. Jan Wersema, to come and to do what she has done on our campus and other campuses around the world, called Project Learn, and it stands for Learning Enhancement and Action Resource Network. And so she did workshops that were designed to be kind of just done in the summertime, where she gives examples of some strategies that professors without the deep training in formal education theory and teaching pedagogy, the skills that Cassie has, how can they bring, in a very simplistic way, tools to engage their students, to make their students think, help the students connect the dots. And so Dr. Jan came, and I'll be honest, there was some resistance. You know, as humans, we don't like change. And when she and I co-taught these workshops, she did the lion's share of the work. We kept hearing, oh, this won't work in our system. This won't work in our system. But Dr. Jan's very persistent, and she kept at it. And to make a long story short, she is now continuing to meet with some of these professors virtually once or twice a month, even though that was not an original part of our design. So it is impacting the professors there, and they're telling us stories about how they're enjoying teaching more because the students are more engaged and they're asking more questions. And so it's been very delightful to see the impact that Jan has made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wonder if I could stick with you, Kurt, as we look at the third objective, which is to enhance interconnectivity and effectiveness in student experiential learning. Could you compare the opportunities for career development and experiential learning available to students in Iowa with those in Kosovo?
Yes, thank you for that question, Joan. You know, in my field of agriculture, as I mentioned before, we're blessed that Iowa is a national leader, international leader in agriculture. And unfortunately, the students in Kosovo don't have as many opportunities as we would have here in Iowa. But what we're trying to do with our activities is to share what we do here in Iowa, to give them ideas, let them pick and choose the things that will work under local conditions. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One of my colleagues, Kristen Burgett, she's an associate teaching professor of animal science. Last year, she did a workshop talking about our structured internship program, where we develop on a company by company, student by student basis, what are the student learning outcomes for this internship? What are the expectations? Who is going to be the supervisor? And what we have seen in Kosovo, they're already doing things. We're just trying to help them do those things better. Kristen is actually going to be coming back in late May of this year to also share with those folks. We do a 1-credit career preparation and animal science course where we teach students, how do you write a cover letter? How do you do your resume? How do you do research on a company? How do you prepare for an interview? What are some good interview questions? And so we're trying to bring this examples not only for the professors to consider a potential curriculum revision, but looking at the career services centers that we're establishing. Mm-hmm. We'll also later this summer have Dr. Mike Ritalik coming, and he was very actively involved in a program at Iowa State University called Science with Practice. And although I'm going to undersell what the program is all about, it's almost like a within university internship program, where students are matched with professors on campus for specific activities. Again, there are student learning outcomes. Students have to do poster presentations at the end of their experience. And it's a platform to get students involved in research, to get them exposed to agricultural extension, writing extension bulletins, things of that nature. And so we've been working pretty hard to try to open some new ways of thinking about experiential learning.
Mhm. Well, thank you, thank you. Cassie, can you explain the career development plan you've designed for students in Kosovo, including the stages a student would undergo to prepare for the job market, for example, during their bachelor's studies?
Certainly. Building off of what Kurt described about changing the mindset through the workshops that his colleagues are presenting and giving folks like very specific, tangible examples. And I discussed how the challenge of scalability is a task in Kosovo. We've developed what we are calling Kosovo Learn, which is a virtual platform through a learning management system that the University of Iowa hosts on Canvas as the host learning management system, but we've customized it for Kosovo. The system itself, our colleague, Dr. Christopher Krompart, has built the modules with the collaboration of our colleagues in country, Artie, and our translators, and basically the whole staff have been involved in different ways at various times. But the first assessment is a self-assessment where students do a personal course that they can earn a digital badge for around their soft skills. What are the professional skills that they need? What are those skills and where do they stand currently so they can develop a professional development plan? Once they earn that badge, they can pursue the mentorship module, which is another course where they learn how to be a good mentee. Simultaneously, we have a course for private sector folks in Kosovo Learn, where individuals can learn how to be good mentors. So then we can match mentors to mentees. The next phase is internships. Same idea. We have a structure for students to learn how to be good interns, and we have companies to learn how to be good internship sites. That's as much of a challenge as that, universities don't provide great support to teaching students the soft skills to be a good intern. There's not really robust internship programs in the private sector generally. So they need to figure out, like, how do I have learning outcomes? How do I supervise an intern? How do I make sure they're meeting milestone goals and progressing in this short duration of 8 weeks that I have them? Those kinds of questions, so that we can match folks. Along the way, everyone earns a digital badge, the kind of thing that you might see on LinkedIn, where people can post their credentials. So the idea is that if students invest in their own professional development, the companies will invest in them. And so we're creating this scaffolding that allows them to do that.
Yeah, very cool. And Zoe, as I understand it, you work with this UI Learn program as well. Can you tell us anything about how students have responded to these trainings? And, are they interested in this? Are they really pursuing the badge?
Sure. So I can tell you so far we've had about 70 students who have completed that first course, that self-assessment for experiential learning. And the courses are set up to sort of scaffold. So that's kind of like the base, the trampoline we jump off of, right? And then we have 53 students who have completed the preparing for mentorship program, which means that they've been set to be matched, which is really cool. As I understand it, students are excited about and enjoy the course. There's, of course, some logistical kind of hurdles with things like Canvas and UI Learn are in English, right? And so we've been sort of trying to be as nimble as possible as a team to kind of come up with solutions to make the Kosovo Learn or UI Learn courses accessible to our students. And I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that. So that's kind of the gist of where I think students see them. When I'm there meeting with students, they seem to enjoy the courses. So that's always good to hear.
Absolutely, absolutely. Artie, let me bring it back to you a little bit here. There are mentoring programs that you've included in this whole project. And as I understand it, mentoring wasn't widely practiced in Kosovo. In business life, perhaps. How did you educate professionals about this practice and convince them to dedicate their time and efforts to supporting students in this way?
Yes, well, certainly it wasn't a very widespread practice. It's quite new to us, but it has been received very well. So in terms of educating professionals on how to be mentors, we've, as Cassie mentioned before, we've had this course on Kosovo Learn, which was about 1 hour long. They all finished it online in their own time, and they got to learn about why mentorship programs are important for student career development, and how they can contribute. In terms of convincing them, it wasn't very difficult. A lot of industry professionals have shown great interest and willingness to help students. A lot of them would say, this is a very good practice. I wish I had this when I was a student myself. Yeah, a lot of them were very eager and couldn't wait to help out. So this was a very nice way to bridge the gap between students and industry professionals. Students have taken it very well as well. They are very glad to meet people who are doing their future jobs, and learn more about how to plan, how to set concrete goals for their career development. And so far the course has been very helpful as well. It's like very detailed in terms of defining what are the topics that they discuss. The course is also designed in a way so all the students that have finished the course are in a position to take a very active role in leading their mentee experience. So they know exactly what to ask their mentors, and what kind of information they're looking for and what to discuss together. Among the topics they discuss are, first of all, how to build a professional network, and how to effectively sell their professional profile to potential employers. Second one is how to prepare a strong CV. Then they get to interview the mentor and like create a better sort of relationship with them, ask them whatever they want. They learn how to search for jobs and prepare for interviews, and also just in general how to make long-term career goals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, I want to be mindful of our time here. We have just a few minutes left, but there is still one more objective that I think we should at least briefly talk about. And maybe Cassie and Kurt, I could turn these questions to you. The fourth and final objective of the activity is enabling demand-driven applied research. Can you explain how research topics and areas for applied research have been identified? Maybe Cassie, I'll ask you to answer that question. And then maybe Kurt, I'll ask you to talk a little bit about the partnership model, where professors collaborate with students to work with specific firms.
I think that research topics are really revealing of the connections between Iowa, Iowa State, and the partner universities. So what we did to identify the topics is we looked at the profiles of the researchers who are involved from both of our Iowa universities. And then we also solicited feedback from the industrial boards, and we solicited feedback from professors themselves and company members to look what the priority topics would be. So I'll give you some highlights.
Mm-hmm.
In ICT, the things that the Kosovo sector needs most research and expertise in consist of machine learning and artificial intelligence, health informatics, wireless computing, cryptography, and social computing and public policy. Those are definitely things that the University of Iowa can help with. We're deep, our bench is deep, and so we're ready to come to their aid to provide support. And as I pass it over to Kurt, the priorities that showed up in the agriculture sector from all the feedback we solicited consisted of the top ones. There's a bunch, but the top ones were food processing, safety and quality, sustainable agriculture, improving the primary production of animal origin foods, and agriculture and resource economics.
Mm-hmm. So Kurt, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the partnership model, where professors collaborate with students to conduct research for specific firms?
Sure. And I think, again, we can bring our experience at Iowa State University, where we have an undergraduate research assistant program that is tied to students' financial aid. We have our honors program that requires students to work side by side with professors for research. The Science with Practice program is a model that we use to connect students and professors working side by side. And so I'm blessed to have a number of my colleagues from Iowa State University who work in these areas of sustainable agriculture and production of animal source foods and agriculture and resource economics, that many of them have committed to coming over the next 3 years to Kosova to work side by side with professors to design experiments to address the industry identified needs, with the caveat that, students have to be a part of these experiments. And so we're going to do our best to make this a collective team effort, and keeping in mind who we really are trying to make the benefit for is the young people of Kosovo, because they are the future of that beautiful nation.
Yeah. Ellie and Artie, I have just a couple of questions for you too regarding this particular objective. Ellie, how receptive are private sector businesses to partnering with professors from these universities for research related to their firms?
I would say that introducing partnership between university professors and private sector businesses for research purposes represent a sort of a novel concept that requires a gradual shift in perspective. While the potential for collaboration is significant, fostering a receptive environment requires strategic effort, which we are undertaking, as both Kurt and Cassie has mentioned. Our approach involves working closely with both academic and industry partners to create platforms that facilitate this collaboration. I would say that number of our partners in Kosovo have already undertaken first steps to facilitate this partnership. They created their research institutes, which hopefully will lay the groundwork for universities to be recognized as hubs for knowledge production. To date, private sector would never turn to universities to sort of collaborate when it comes to research. They usually outsource the research work to other private companies who do research. What we're aiming to do is shift that and have the private sector address those questions to the university and acknowledge the university as a primary sort of institution that can provide support and, work together with the private sector to publish these research. So it's a start, I would say. It's something that hasn't been done so far. So I think that the results will be tremendous and very good for university and for the private sector.
Artie, was there anything you would want to add to that in just these couple minutes left?
Well, just to summarize, in terms of what we've done for Objective 4, applied research, as Cassie and Kurt mentioned previously, conducted this survey and produced a report with identifying the needs for topics to focus for applied research. And apart from that, we've also reached out to businesses to discuss and talk to them in person in regards to the needs that they face for applied research. And so far, we've gotten very good feedback. And we have a lot of interest demonstrated from these businesses to participate. So right now, we're just in the stage of pairing up these, finding the topics, pairing up the professors, and making it happen.
Sounds great. And I think I'd like to turn for this final comment here to Russ, if I may. In what ways do you anticipate this activity strengthening the sister-state relationship that Iowa and Kosovo share?
Well, thank you for that question, Joan. I guess what I hope to see is Iowa businesses, not just in the ICT and agricultural sectors, but really across the spectrum, take notice of the opportunities in Kosovo and to partner with some of our collaborators there, that there's quite a bit of opportunity, and that if some Iowa businesses are looking to expand their market share, especially in Eastern Europe or Southern Europe, that they would have many willing partners in Kosovo. Also, I think just in terms of the sister state relationship, my hope is to see more Kosovans come to Iowa. I mean, there are some delegations from different municipalities or different commercial groups coming to Iowa, but I'd like to see that scaled up so that more Kosovans can get to know what life is like in Iowa.
Mhm, mhm. Well, wow, I can't thank you enough, all of you, for sharing this time with us and telling these stories and explaining what you're all up to. We're very excited about this, and I guess you have another 4 years on this activity, this grant project. It was altogether 5 years. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's
Um,
correct. Mhm.
Yeah. So a lot of time yet ahead. And now I have to go to Kosovo. Everyone is talking about how beautiful and wonderful and friendly this place is. I might not have known that if we hadn't had a chance to talk tonight. So thank you so much. And we wish you all the best as you continue in these efforts. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you
Mhm.
very much. Bye.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jen.
bye-bye, and thank you. And now, if you're able to stay with us, please do. This is World Canvas from International Programs at the University of Iowa. As you know, I'm Joan Kerr, and it's my pleasure now to introduce you to two very special members of the University of Iowa community, Catherine Liu and Amira Nash. Catherine and Amira are the 2023 winners of the UI's Global Student Awards, which recognize their exceptional activities in support of international education. So I see Amira and Catherine. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. I'm real excited to talk to you. We'd love to get to know a little bit about each of you and the global experiences you've had. And I wonder if I could start with you, Catherine. You are an undergraduate student, I know, and I'd like to start by asking you to tell us about your family and where you come from.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Joan, and thank you for having me today. I'm originally from Xiamen, China, and it is an island in southern China, and it's also from Fujian province.
Yeah, and so you have come halfway around the world to study here at the University of Iowa. Why did you choose Iowa?
So when I was applying, I'm pretty sure that I didn't want to go to a big city, and I wanted to go to school with a great liberal arts vibe and great program of that. And I found out that Iowa City has been recognized as a UNESCO City of Literature, and meanwhile, I got an offer and I was just be here.
Yeah, no, that's terrific because you're majoring in English and creative writing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what drew you to those majors? Why did you decide those were the things you wanted to concentrate on?
I like to read, and I'm also into crafting pieces through text. And I'm curious about what is it like to study literature here and read and write in a different language.
Mm-hmm. When you were in China, you had already identified your interest in writing, your interest in expressing yourself through language. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite classes, maybe a special professor or two?
Sure. So, one of my favorite classes is a postmodern fiction class and provided by English department. And from that class, I first time learned about how to read and approach text as a writer and reader. And for instance, we learned about what is close reading and what is the idea of having a voice in the text. And I write nonfiction, and my favorite professor is Melissa Peebles, and she's teaching at their nonfiction writing program. And I had a great time in the class and in a English honor seminar.
Mhm.
And I'm keeping working with her on my writing sample as well.
Wow. Well, as you know, your recognition as a Global Student Awardee comes as a result of your deep involvement in international education, whether on campus or abroad. And wow, you have got some list of activities here. I'll just read 2 or 3. So you're currently Vice President of the International Student Advisory Board. past president of the Chinese Students and Scholars Association, and you have been an international student ambassador for the UI Admissions Office since 2022, and you're currently working in international programs as a peer assistant for International Student and Scholar Services. Why have you devoted so much of your time and energy, aside from your interest in English and creative writing, to increasing the awareness of international education on campus?
I feel like as a liberal art major student, I like to see things from a humanitarian perspective, and I also like to introduce those perspectives to students who like me if I have a chance to. Because I believe that those perspectives provide another angle of seeing things and the world, and that's kind of why we choose to leave our home country and study here, and which is able to create a greater understanding and empathy for diverse culture and experiences as well.
Yeah, I understand that you also participated in a study abroad program, writing in Greece. So you're not only an international student studying here on our campus, but then you go with, I imagine, the majority of students, if not all of them who were on your program, were American students from the US. So that's a double study abroad experience for you. What did you learn from that and observing your classmates, as some of them may have been on their first international trip?
I feel like that was a great experience because as a person study abroad and able to go to another country as an international student, it's kind of like you said, a double journey. And I do feel like it's pretty interesting to spend time with peers, domestic students, and in another culture, which is experiencing that empathy that shared by our people and peers, and to showcasing that there's some sympathies and echoes have created among peers, and that's a great experience of as an international student who goes study abroad with a group of peers.
Mm-hmm. What do you think your most valuable learning experience has been through international education?
I think the most valuable experience would be my involvement of campus engagement and also as a student employee. So prior to my involvement in such engagement and student employment, or as a student leader and student employee, I had operated within a kind of solitude pathway, just like only care about my own grades, my own future, my own life. And after that, I realized that my efforts extended beyond personal growth, and I'm affect minor yet meaningful changes within my surroundings. And by realizing it, that have brought me with a very profound sense of fulfillment, and that's really a gift, I would say.
Yeah, well, and something that you wrote that is published on the International Programs website, you said that you want to make sure that international students on our campus have that sense of belonging. How do you try to help students find their way? Not every student will be outgoing enough to join a group or to run for vice president or president of an organization. But when you speak one-on-one with an international student here on campus, what kind of guidance can you give them so that they will feel like they belong?
I mean, I prefer to talk to person like one-on-one, so I'm able to kind of approach them as a person. And I do feel like once the barriers of national culture or even personal identities are removed, each person can connect to each other with a fundamental human level. And I think maybe consider everyone we met as a person first, and then consider their nationality identification and cultural differences then. And that's kind of an important factor that international education has teaches me, that people have shared features, and everyone feels anxious when they encounter issues and yearning for solutions. And also people feel soft when they've been seen, and also when there's someone showing their empathy, they will be moved. And that's why I feel like it's important to approach people treat them as a person first, and then think about their identification.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. And so what are your future academic or career goals?
I'm consider entering either a creative writing MFA program or a English MA program for graduate school, and maybe continue my work with museums as well.
Wow. Well, clearly you are a very deserving student of this award, and it's a real pleasure to talk to you, Catherine. Thank you for joining us. And now
Thank
I'd like to switch on over to Amira Nash. Thank you, Amira, for being with us.
Hi, Joan. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so nice to see you too. So, as we know, you've also received the Global Student Award for your commitment to international education. And I would love for you to share some of your background, where you grew up, what you were studying as a graduate student, and how international engagement has impacted your career so far.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I did my schooling there, K-12, and then I went to the University of Iowa for undergrad. It was actually the only university I applied to, and I ended up staying and getting my master's there, and now I'm working on my PhD here as well. And after I finished my undergrad, I actually taught in Iowa City. I taught high school social studies, and students identified as English language learners.
Yeah.
And the experiences I had as an undergraduate really helped me become a better teacher, and I could really see how it had shaped me long after I had come back from my trips and made those connections. And so now in my work, I work full-time in the Baker Teacher Leader Center at the University and the College of Education. And really those international exchanges and study abroads and just the partnerships that we've developed and sustained have really shaped my work and sort of my outlook on how I work with future teachers.
Yeah. Well, to just run through a few of the things that I have learned about some of your international work, I understand that your first study abroad fair was when you were a first-year undergraduate student, and that inspired you to go to Barcelona, Spain. And then after that, you went on 2 winterim programs with Dr. Mitch Kelly from College of Education in Pondicherry and Bangalore, India. Then you went to Cuba on a volunteer experience. You did some of your student teaching in Ecuador. You've been to Senegal, and you also co-led 17 University of Iowa students traveling to Ghana in a new course. I mean, you have been all over the world, truly, and you have been really creating an interesting set of professional experiences, even as you're going through your undergraduate, graduate, and now your work in the Baker Teacher Leaders Center. What has driven you to do all of this? Has it been a special person here or there, a particular professor, or just your own curiosity?
Yeah, I think a combination of those things. I had never been out of the country, out of the US until my freshman year at Iowa, and I went to that study abroad fair, and I found out that winterim trips existed, and I said, oh, perfect, like between semester, I can try something out. And I applied for the Barcelona trip and I got it. And it was, like I said, it was my first time out of the country, and I was there with a few other students from the US from different states, and we were taking a course on Spanish history, and I was a Spanish minor at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember we got there and the professor, she handed us all a sheet of paper and she said, okay, it's your first day of class. She said, draw a map of Spain. And she said, label where we are. And then she asked us to write about the structure of the government. And we're all sitting there looking at each other. And she says, really, only Americans are like this. Like they come to a place and really don't know anything about it. And I that really stuck with me. And so now when I take students abroad, that's something that I really think about is like, how much do we know? Why are we going to the place? You know, why us? Why there?
Yeah.
And so that was really, it really helped develop my curiosity and wanting to know more. And then that same year I got back and I met Dr. Mitch Kelly, and he was going to India the following year. And he says it very casually as if like, hey, are you going to the game this weekend? Like, hey, you gonna go to India with me? You know? And he's pretty good at recruiting students to go. And so I ended up going with him twice. And another person that I met was Linda Baker. And of course, I work in the Baker Teacher Leader Center now, and it's named after Linda Baker. And she was an educator for many years. And she really had a vision that all of our teacher ed students would have an experience internationally in a classroom with other students prior to stepping foot in a classroom, you know, here in Iowa or in the US. And I really took that vision to heart. And when I got back and I became a teacher, like I really understood what she meant by that. And I see now when I get to work with students and take them abroad, how much it changes them. And especially, you know, 2-3 years down the road, how much they can bring that experience into their own classrooms. And I mean, I taught in Iowa City. There's tons of immigrant students here and tons of cultures and language backgrounds. I mean, in the Iowa City district alone, where I taught, there's nearly 200 students that are identified as English learners and over 75 languages spoken. And so having a bit of background to be able to say like, oh, I've been to where you're from, or
Yeah.
I speak the language that you speak, it really gives me something more to connect with them on. And I like what Catherine said, you know, seeing them as people first. And that's really helped me. Those experiences have really helped me to do that. So really, it's been a combination of that first study abroad experience, and then Dr. Kelly really pushing me to do it again and to go to a different place that I probably never would have otherwise.
Mhm.
And meeting Linda Baker and really seeing her passion and her generosity for this sort of work has really inspired me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, both of you are just incredible inspirations to those of us who are at the far end of our career, that I identify as that, and people just starting out, and also students you run into, students you may teach in K to 12 classes, or you know, wherever you might encounter them. And in your writing, Catherine, and I see that Russ is still with us. Russ, I know that you want to congratulate these amazing students on the work they've done and on the fact that they've both been named global students here at the UI.
Exactly. So I've worked with Catherine and with Amira in many different circumstances over the years, and I have undying admiration for both of them. I think it's important to remember that they are both full-time students
Yeah.
and full-time leaders, that they set an incredible example for our student body. And the level of collaboration, partnership, innovation that they both demonstrate on a consistent basis is really unparalleled. And to use your word, Joan, it is very, very inspiring. So on behalf of international programs, but just as a global educator, I would like to thank both Catherine and Amira and congratulate them both on just marvelously successful records of engagement, learning, and example setting that they provided during their time here at Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just hearing you both talk about where you've been and what you've been doing and what inspires you is really just, it's incredible for those of us who love international education, international travel, kind of bringing the world, people all over the world, a little bit closer together. You truly are just an inspiration. And I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon. Congratulations again on receiving this award. And I guess we've come to the end of our program. So I'd like to thank all of our guests for being with us this evening. If you would like to hear this conversation again or previous World Canvas programs, you'll find the entire archive on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange, and on Apple Podcasts. So for the University of Iowa and International Programs, I'm Joan Kerr. Thank you for listening and good night.